Welcome back to Danielle O'Terry's Italy. I need just a moment to explain to you something new that I'm doing with my destination deep dives. Right now, these guides are a paid subscriber benefit for a reason. They're not just casual overviews that you'd find from a quick search, and they aren't padded with links that earn me a commission. Each destination deep dive is the result of months and years, very often, of travel, research, and honest trial and error. For every place that I recommend, there are plenty that I paid to visit and tested and found out that they are just not worth your time and money. What makes these different is the insight behind each recommendation because we don't need more information. My goal is to help you fill your trip with meaning. But here's the thing. Lately, a lot of folks sign up for the free trials, they download all the materials, and then they disappear. And if you know me, you know this isn't a mass market affiliate-driven resource. This is travel guidance that you can trust that is born out of genuine experience and investment. So I've got to change things up. Subscribers will still get first access to each month's destination deep dive. You'll be invited to the premier Zoom session where you can join me live, ask me anything you like, and get real answers. And the video replay will be available for 3 days. After that, a polished version of the video presentation will go behind a paywall, and it will also be accompanied by a beautifully detailed, customizable itinerary. I drove myself nuts working on the Florence itinerary because there's so many things that I want to show you, but I also wanted them all to fit together and to make sense and to not be overwhelming and for everything to kind of click together to tell a story. So if you've ever wished for someone with real taste, yes, I think I have really good taste, to just tell you day by day what matters, what's worth it, and how to make your trip memorable, that's what I'm here for. I remember a friend once said to me, I wish I could walk into a bookstore and the books that I love most would just fall off of the shelf. Now, algorithms claim to do that, and like Amazon actually, got to give it to them, does a pretty good job. But in the travel world, it's not working well. Influencers chase commissions and crowds. That's how they make a living. It's just how the sausage is made. But I would rather guide you to quiet, awe-filled places where wonder is the real reward. So that's what these destination deep dives are about, and that's why I charge for them. So the new Florence deep dive is just out. I just hit publish a couple of days ago and haven't shared it with anybody. And all the details to purchase that are in the show notes. In September, I'll focus on Matera, such an amazing place, and soon Venice, Rome, Naples, and many, many more will be available. And now, speaking of Florence, the best reason to visit Florence is art. Always has been and always will be. And because that's my passion, I want to share with you the art and artists that you should know and that can make your trip to Italy much more memorable and meaningful. And so that's why this episode is dedicated to a Renaissance painter named Fra Angelico. He was born Guido di Pietro around 1395 near Florence, and he lived until 1455. And he was called Fra Angelico because he was both a Dominican friar, a brother, Fra, and because he was celebrated in his own time as, quote, the angelic painter. He infused his subjects with a profound sense of peace, humility, and an emotional resonance that you can still feel today. And Fra Angelico remains deeply beloved for the serenity and grace of his frescoes, especially the ones created for the monks of San Marco in Florence. San Marco is a museum, but it was a monastery with individual cells for 44 monks that were painted by Fra Angelico. And though San Marco is right in the center of Florence, very close to the Accademia, and a very, very important place in the history of art, it's pretty quiet. And you can walk through the space, hear your own footsteps, and have a one-on-one experience with the original works of art in the same place where they have been for centuries, so you can experience art, not just look at it. And because these paintings were contemplated and adored by the monks in their daily prayer, they weren't created to be decoration. They were like spiritual windows that you could step through. And you know what? Today, if you're quiet enough and you look closely, you can step through them too. Now, this fall, Florence is celebrating Fra Angelico with an extraordinary exhibition at Palazzo Strozzi and the Museo di San Marco. It's a landmark event and it brings together masterpieces from around the world and newly restored works of art from San Marco. A visit to Florence is always an unparalleled opportunity to engage with original works of art. But this fall, it's even better because of this Fra Angelico exhibition that's going to stretch from the halls of San Marco into the Palazzo Strozzi. Joining us today is historian and educator Alexandra Lawrence. She's teaching an online course about Fra Angelico ahead of this eagerly awaited exhibition, and together we're going to geek out on him a little bit. We call him the gateway drug for art. And we'll also explore what makes his art so timeless and why every visitor to Florence, whether you're going during the timing of this exhibition or in the future, should seek him out.
My name is Alexandra Lawrence. I've been here since 1999. I had studied abroad when I was a political science undergraduate, knowing, truly not next to nothing about the history of art, about the Italian language. I was a Spanish minor. So, I sort of came over and did all of that. This was back in the 90s where the only options for study when you came to study abroad were history of Florence, history of Italy, and of course the history of art and the Italian language. And so I had, a bit of the cliche, which is this incredible semester abroad that ended up just completely transforming my life. Because of the art history, in particular, it really was the art history that spoke to me on such a deep level. And in particular, this moment of the early Renaissance, which again, I knew next to nothing about, but sort of the Donatello and the Fra Angelico and that, the Masaccio, Brunelleschi moment. And so I had taken this class, had this experience, and I love to joke that I loved everything about Italy so much. Even still today, I love the garbage cans, and I love to sort of tease about this, but like it's so civilized that you step on the pedal. And now, of course, we just swipe and it's so easy and then it just opens right up. It's so lovely. So I clearly was obsessed with Italy. And then I decided to do the thing that I had really wanted to do since I had moved to Florence in the first place, which was I went to do the course and the exam to become a licensed guide, which Danielle, I know I don't know how much your listeners know about how incredibly intense this program is. So it's a 10-month program, and I had a very small child at that point. So I was juggling all my classes and the guide course, and worth it. It was amazing. But it was one of those, you're just kind of thrown into, I call it kind of like Florentine history and art history boot camp. So
I did my graduate school in Florence, 2001, 2002.
Okay.
And I feel like it was plenty busy with tourists, but there was definitely a season. Like it was like November 1st, everything was empty. You would walk through the piazzas and it was just actually Florentines and students like myself. But now there really it doesn't feel like there's much of a shoulder season anymore. However, that was before Airbnb, before the cheap airlines were really as abundant as they are. Most people were still doing train travel, and people were still really coming to Florence for art. And now I feel like people are coming to Florence for sandwiches and wine windows. And I mean, I like sandwiches and wine. I'm not made of stone, but it has kind of made me upset that art, which is, is there a better city on planet Earth for art than Florence? I don't think there is.
No.
And so few people seem to even know about it beyond Michelangelo's David. Tell me your experience.
That's
of that.
right. There is a tiny bit of a lull. It happens at the beginning of December, right after Thanksgiving and before the Christmas holidays, but nothing like it used to be where you felt, oh, okay, this is the moment. And it's going to be 4 months because it would go, through February. Beyond David, absolutely. There is now it's, the sandwich thing, Babette will leave over in the corner. But now it's pasta making, which somehow has supplanted the visit to the Uffizi or to Pitti or to really anywhere, because they want to make pasta. And then another thing that I've noticed, which is crazy, is this thing with like bracelets. Like they make charm bracelets. And so I have a lot, it's a TikTok kind of thing, but not like artisans. Like you said, there is nowhere better and there's nowhere more magical to be able to immerse yourself in one of the most consequential moments in our history.
Whether it's, a palazzo,
Yeah.
a storefront, just like the little sidewalk altars that you see embedded on the streets. I mean, you're so truly immersed. It's so,
Immersed. Yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly right. Yeah, the tabernacles, they're incredible.
Fra Angelico is one of those painters. I think you can call him a gateway drug.
I love him as a gateway drug. That is amazing, and absolutely yes. And also San Marco. I mean, so the reason that I decided to do this particular series of lectures is because of the exhibition that's going to be taking place at Palazzo Strozzi starting in September and running through January. And so Palazzo Strozzi is the type of event space that and foundation where truly monumental exhibitions take place in Florence. So you would think it would be the Uffizi, you would think it would be, but it's Strozzi, and there's a whole variety of reasons for this. And we've had so many just in the past decade, 15 years of these monographic exhibitions for artists like Verrocchio, Bronzino, Pontormo, Rosso, that have really transformed the way that we get to know that we know these artists, not even get to know them, but that even those of us who know a lot about them are exposed to so much new information. So it's the first monographic exhibition in, I believe, in Italy, and perhaps on a larger scale in the world in 70 years. So it's going to be great. So that really was the impetus behind it. I thought, this is perfect. I get to talk about this artist that I love so much. My introduction to Fra Angelico and my true love affair with him has been conducted not exclusively because he's wonderful and he's in a lot of different places, but for me, the convent of San Marco in Florence, it truly is one of those experiences that we don't get very often. As you know, we go into a museum and everything it's wonderful and it can be beautifully lit and you can have exposure to so much, but it's taken out of its context. And instead, in the convent of San Marco, we get not only 44 cells of friars that each have their own individual fresco, their own individual painting. We also get the more public, the hallway, the corridor paintings that he did. So there's more than just that, but it's the cells, let's be honest, where you get to have this moment of truly, I mean, I think about it in terms of time travel. And I think that's what art really can be for us, is this way to just fly across the centuries and to connect with the artist, but with the friars, with the, with the human people that have inhabited that place and that were moved and changed and worked on by these works of art. And so for me, the convent of San Marco, it just takes it up a notch, because not only are you getting to see the works, you get to see them in situ, you get to see them on site where, no context needed.
These works of art were not created, these paintings that are on the individual cells where the friars would have lived and, slept and prayed.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't created to be decorative. They weren't created to make the room look nice. And I think today we do think of art that way. I'm in the process of, changing some things on the walls in my apartment, and I'm thinking about the color and what matches with the table and the couch and all of that. But that's not the way these works of art were conceived of. They were conceived as sort of mediums for prayer and contemplation and inspiration. So they were deeply interactive. They functioned more like our computer screens function to us than anything that we might hang on the wall. And so it really is, like you said, time travel when you're able to go and stand in one of those cells quietly without a giant crowd around you and have a relationship with that work of art as somebody did 400 or 500 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, that gives me chills, I have to say. I mean, it's that, that sense of Timothy Verdon, who's the director of the Opera del Duomo, Monsignor Verdon. He said something so beautiful about the San Marco frescoes. Like you said, they weren't for decoration. Uh, they were images that were meant to inspire. They were meant um, to be contemplated and on an extraordinarily deep level. But Monsignor Verdon says, oh, I think this is beautiful. San Marco is a Dominican convent, is now and was at the time observant Dominicans, and the Dominicans are the order of the preachers. This is kind of their second name, and so these friars who are sitting in these cells, who have their desk and have their bed, and who are in constant contact with these images, Monsignor Verdon says that even though the images themselves weren't visible to the Florentine public for hundreds of years, it wasn't until the 19th century that the public was allowed in. He said they were they were sort of communicated to the public through the sermons of the friars. And so this sense that they were kind of making their way out of the convent walls via the preaching and the sermons and the contemplation that these friars had, it was their job and it's how they made their money. They had to rely on alms. And so I adore that idea that the picture then goes into the words and then it goes out into the ears of the Florentine people. And so in a certain sense, they were out there all along, even though we couldn't see them.
Tell us the story of Fra Angelico. Who is he and how did he become this gateway drug for us art historians?
Gateway drug, exactly. I think he was a very unlikely gateway drug. He was born in, we're not really sure, but let's go with 1395 because that typically sort of tends to be where we fall. And then he dies in 1455. He's not born in Florence. He's born out in the Mugello, which is the region, the area kind of to the north of the city of Florence. It's the same exact town, Vicchio, it's called, where Giotto was also born. So you do kind of have to wonder what's going on there for both of these men to have been born there. But he comes into Florence. He's called Guido, and he's the son of Pietro or Piero, however you want to say this name, Peter. So no last name, which gives us a lot of information, actually. It tells us that, he doesn't have a ton of status because there is no surname. And he comes into Florence, and from the best that we can understand, the first kind of moment that for certain we have mention of him is in the 14 teens, where he's paid for something that he did at the church on an altarpiece in the church of Santo Stefano al Ponte, which I shouldn't say it no longer exists. The church exists, but it's been deconsecrated, and now they do those multimedia Van Gogh shows and that sort of thing. At any rate, we get this, this little written fragment that he was paid 5 florins or something like this for work that he had done on an altarpiece. The altarpiece is lost. We're not sure where he trains, but we understand that he has become, by the 14 teens, a part of some of these workshops. But he doesn't actually take his vows to join the Dominicans. And more than anything, Danielle, he joins the observant Dominicans. So like any order worth its salt, like the Franciscans, like the Benedictines, like the Dominicans, we have branches that are a little more lax and we have branches that are a little more hardcore. So he joins one of the stricter branches of the Dominican order, the order of the preachers. The Dominicans were pretty hardcore. When you got in at the beginning, there was a long period of study and you had to be sort of tested to be able to progress as a friar. So he, probably was concentrated on that. And the really fascinating thing about Fra Giovanni, because he changes his name, he takes the name John Giovanni. He's an admin guy. He's a businessman. He has a workshop. He's got this entrepreneurial spirit. He's a leader. He's someone who's not just, hidden away, contemplative. And so what we get are these, sort of heavenly paintings, but he's someone who's really active within his order. And he sort of travels around. He's up in Fiesole. I'm sure you've been. There's a church called San Domenico and it's kind of halfway up, from Florence up to Fiesole. And it's in a beautiful spot. I don't think it gets better, the rolling hills and the olive groves, because of a whole bunch of political decisions. This community was then transferred down to Florence. And this is of extreme consequence to Fra Angelico, because he will be moved down as a painter in the convent of San Marco, where Cosimo, the elder de' Medici, along with Pope Eugenius IV, who was Pope at the time, had come together to decide on a program that Cosimo could pay for to be able to receive the indulgences, to be able to get out of purgatory quicker than he would have. And so there's this incredible moment of metaphysics and money and beauty and power and everything that comes together, that sees Fra Angelico as the boss of the shop. He's this great Tuscan artist whose large majority of his work was carried out in Florence and around the city. Died and is buried in Rome at the Church of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, which is just tucked behind the Pantheon down in Rome. And so it was in that place, and this is a little tidbit about Fra Angelico that I love so much, is that John Paul II in, I can't remember the year now, either in the 80s or 90s, went to Santa Maria sopra Minerva, and he gave an incredibly beautiful homily at the tomb of Fra Angelico, where he officially declared him the patron of painters. And so this, kind of connection back with his roots as a friar.
To isolate his most famous works for people that might just want to look online,
Sure.
or we're going to visit Florence during this exhibition, this is definitely a wonderful opportunity. But if not, it's the Annunciations, and specifically the Annunciation that's in San Marco, and then the one that's in Cortona, which are so beautiful. I was particularly attracted to those the very first time I came to Florence was in 1997, when I was an undergraduate, and I was studying graphic design. And that's what attracted me to the early Renaissance, was that you had these paintings, but then it was the typography.
I'm going to jump in here with my art historian hat and explain to you what an annunciation is. It's a very common subject matter in medieval and Renaissance painting, and it shows the moment when the Archangel Gabriel tells the Virgin Mary that she will be the mother of Jesus. It's a key event in Christian tradition. So typically, you'll see Gabriel entering or kneeling with a gesture of greeting, and Mary looks either surprised or humble, and she's sometimes reading a book or turning toward the angel. And these images are filled with symbols, so there are often lily flowers that are there for Mary's purity and virginity. Sometimes there's a dove that represents the Holy Spirit and the divine involvement in the conception. Sometimes rays of light are shown coming from above, and they symbolize God's presence. And there's often an enclosed garden or a locked door, and they often appear in the background as metaphors for Mary's virginity, a garden locked away, but they also serve as a reference to the Old Testament and the Song of Solomon. And then there are books, open or closed, that refer to the Old Testament and the New Testament, to the prophecies of the Old Testament and the fulfillment of them. And then lastly, there are usually ordinary household items, jars, towels, candles, and sometimes a freshly blown out candle can suggest the arrival of divine light. So all of these details, part of everyday life, are packed with meaning, but also Gabriel, the angel himself, usually has some pretty amazing wings.
He has his hand raised in a sort of greeting. And sometimes if there are words, I call it the Ave moment, so the hail full of grace, where he's greeting her. And at that stage, the young woman, Maria, is surprised, right? So sometimes you see her kind of physically pulling away, her arms maybe up around her chest, sometimes even physically turning because she's so surprised. And then the second posture, the sort of gesturing of the Virgin, is the moment where she is accepting. So let it be done according to your will. And so it's this very intimate moment that's taking place between the angel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary. It's filled um, with so much anticipation, a little bit of fear sometimes, trepidation maybe is a better word. Um, Oftentimes, and in Fra Angelico, you get this a lot, you'll have an enclosed garden off on the side. And usually we call that an hortus conclusus, and that is an enclosed garden that in the history of art, we're always looking for meaning, right? And so, what does the enclosed garden symbolize? That's the virginity of the Virgin Mary. So, if you do come across an Annunciation, and with Fra Angelico, you get it a lot with this enclosed space, but with Fra Angelico, it's also a way for him to get some nature in there.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah,
The Annunciation works are just they're so quiet, but they're also so filled with tension, but tension without conflict, which is
that's exactly right.
puts the paintings into a completely different energy, because usually tension leads to conflict that needs to be resolved. Instead, here it's tension, that's anticipation, that's acceptance, and then beauty. And they're works of art that you can really sit with quietly by yourself. And even just 2 or 3 minutes of contemplation can give you a lot.
It can give you a lot, and they can also be really fun to compare. Like, I know that for people who aren't used to looking at a lot of art, like one thing that I do sometimes if I'm in a museum where maybe it's a type of art that I don't know a ton about, or it's a collection I don't know a ton about, I'll just let myself be taken from work to work. So I'm looking at hands, or I'm looking at fabrics. Fra Angelico is the king. He's the master at giving us those rainbow wings that we just drool over. I mean, talk about a gateway drug. Like, you see that Annunciation, and it's like, I want to only look at Annunciations for the rest of my life. If
Yes,
that's
it's
what
true. You
you
learn
like.
about one Annunciation, you have the toolkit to look at all of them. I also love the figure of Gabriel too, and that there's so much attention placed to the wings, because I think, again, for everybody, Gabriel is the one figure that we see in the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible, the Christian Bible, the New Testament, and in the Quran, because it's Gabriel who speaks the Quran to Muhammad. And Gabriel is also one of the archangels, and in angelology, which was a formal course of study, the
Okay.
archangels are genderless. They are the creatures
Yeah.
closest to God. And so we say Gabriel and we use he as his pronoun, but really, if you look at him, he's rather agender. He's got, kind of long, flowy golden hair very often, and very beautiful wings. He is sort of this genderless creature that comes to the Virgin Mary. So I think I'm going to say the idea of somebody that's agender or gender non-binary is a contemporary idea, but it's not. It's absolutely an ancient idea.
I love that. And in fact, as I was saying, I usually say they when I talk about, because they are gender neutral. I always say,
Yes.
this is, and it's so true, this, and angelology. I mean, you go back to the Middle Ages, and it's like, angelology and Dante, for example, is fascinating. I mean, you go to the baptistry and Florence. I mean, you can just go talk about a gateway. I mean, that will really take you places. But yes, exactly that. With history and the history of art, I find the saying that most comes to mind is like, "There's nothing new under the sun." Everything, we are just constantly revisiting, reproposing in a beautiful way, because it's all being mediated through each individual that has never been and will never be again. And so nothing is being just repeated whole cloth, but tutto torna, this idea, everything kind of returns, and everything repeats, and it's up to us then. I always say, you take yourself with you when you look at art, and you should.
Mhm.
And I want to know, when I'm taking clients through, or I'm taking students, like, I want to know what you think about this. I want to know what questions you have. I want to know what you see, why you think there is no right answer. There's no, it's so fascinating to me how we can be looking at the exact same thing, and you'll be over here and I'll be over there. And oh, it's wonderful. And I think Fra Angelico has that ability to allow, like you said, where you can just sit and contemplate. And there's a kind of exhale that happens with Fra Angelico when you're standing in front of his works, where there's that allowing of a bit of breath, a bit of peace, a bit of contemplation, because it's so clear that that's what these works were for.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those who might be traveling to Florence this fall, but those who aren't as well, you're teaching some online classes, right?
I am. I'm doing a 6-week course on Fra Angelico. So we're starting on September 4th. Everything, of course, is live and then recorded and sent out. So you have access to it, even if you can't make the live. And we meet on Thursdays. So it's 6 consecutive Thursdays for about an hour and a half. And we're doing a deep dive into Fra Angelico. So the first 4 weeks are really looking intensely at his activity in San Marco, his early work, and then down in Rome, which is really fun, the Cappella Nicolina, the Nicolene Chapel. And then the last 2 sessions are dedicated to the exhibition. So it opens September 26th. And I did this with Donatello, which was, I think, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. But we were still kind of in a moment where not everybody could travel, and certainly not everybody can travel now. So the way I've kind of envisioned this is, yes, whether you are going to be here, you can use it as a kind of prep, and go into the exhibition with, your toolkit, or if you can't make it to Florence, then you'll have these 2 sessions, one which will concentrate on the Strozzi works and the other at San Marco, where it will feel like as close as you can possibly get. And I will say this, because I know there's a lot of people, of course, that can't come. Digital images and having an artist that is so popular and someone that continues to grow in popularity. This is a problem we have with women artists, for example, is finding high resolution images. Someone like Fra Angelico, you can access these images on your computer. You can zoom in, and I'm certainly not suggesting one replaces the other, but you can have a blast really looking at these and zooming in and checking out details and going deep into these works that are really available for all of us.
Good. Okay. So one last question.
Absolutely.
Most people who love Florence as much as you do don't also love Napoli. But you love Napoli, which of course is my
Exactly.
spiritual home. I mean, I'm Italian American. My roots are all in Campania, and Florence was the first place that I went to in Italy, and I of course loved it and loved it so much that I stayed there for study. But
Yeah.
it was when I went to Napoli that I was like, I'm home.
I'm home.
So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your love of Napoli and what you're
Oh,
doing there.
oh, I'm so thrilled. So, in fact, I think you and I connected, funnily enough. I think you had written something for Travel and Leisure or something on Napoli. I mean, back in the
Oh, maybe it was
day, this
about
was
Capo
kind
di
of
Monte. Yeah,
Right
Twitter
on point.
nest. Yeah.
Exactly. It was Capo di Monte, and it was so
Mhm.
helpful and wonderful. And so it was Napoli where you and I had first connected, funnily enough. But I know, and in
Okay.
fact, a lot of my friends, because Florentines, there's a lot of Florentines who just won't even go or won't, they don't entertain. And people will say to me all the time, especially my Florentine friend, but like, how do you do Florence? I don't understand this love that you have. And you know what? I don't either. It's one of those things that it happened totally unexpectedly. I had been, I think, for one day when I was a student, and then had completely kind of lived my life Rome and to the north of Rome. And then I went down not very long ago. I mean, it was probably 2015, 2016. And we stayed, I think, 4 days, and I left. And I remember being on the train and thinking, and saying, I can't wait to go back. Like, I need to plan my next trip immediately. And so I did, and I started teaching. Actually, I was at Syracuse at the time in the field studies department. So I designed a Naples program and got to really learn about it through, my typical way, which, is probably similar to yours. Like, you go in the history and art history. It is so mysterious. It's so magical. There's no explaining it. And so for me, just being there and just like sinking into it and allowing it's a place I loved. You called it your spiritual home. For sure, I think past life, something there's some pull that I can't really explain about
Yeah.
Napoli, but my love just grows and grows exponentially every day, all the time. And it's just the exact opposite of Florence, and it's great.
Is the exact opposite of Florence. Although, and this was my specialty, was the Renaissance in Naples, and it was a spectacular Renaissance. Vasari was there. Boccaccio went to law school in Naples and talks about it as one of the most fun times of his life. But so much of that was lost during World War II, which was really like my challenge, why I stopped doing my PhD, because I said, oh my God, I'm going to have to.
Oh,
It was so difficult at the time, and it has changed quite a bit, actually. There's been much more scholarship on the Renaissance in Naples since. But I always say about Florence, I go to Florence and I'm so intellectually stimulated. My brain is on fire. I'm looking at all of these things that just get me so excited to think. But when I go to Naples, there I feel Naples lower. It's more in the belly
love.
and below.
Oh my
And it's like the
Fanta,
visceral.
baby. Yes, it is. It's that whole, the kind of head, yeah, lower than the heart even. I mean,
Yeah.
truly. Yes, I love.
When I lived in Florence, I had a language partner, a Florentine student who was trying to learn English. I was learning Italian, so we would meet and speak with each other. And I told her I was going to go to Napoli on my break, and
Oh,
she was like, "No, you cannot go." She told me she decided you're going to Parma. You're going to Parma, and then she texted me in the middle of that week. And texting was brand new on the flip phone, hitting the same number
you had to
3 times for the
letters.
lever. And she's like, "How was your vacation in Parma?" And I was like, "I went to Napoli." And then she never spoke to me again.
That's fabulous. That's it. But I mean, this is kind of part of my thing now. Even now, I mean, but after the pandemic, it has gone completely insane and things are getting, but I still have to address this, and I still have clients, return clients, as I'm certain you do too. Although your education of that whole area, I'm sure your clients know very well, but I still have clients who will come to me and say, oh, we'll only go with you. And I'll be honest, the pickpockets are better in Florence than they are in Napoli.
If you would like to join Alexandra's class, you can sign up on Eventbrite. I'm going to provide the link in the show notes. You can also follow her on Substack, at her newsletter Illuminare, and on Instagram. All of those things will be inside the show notes. Just go to danielleoteri.com. And while you're there, consider becoming a paid subscriber. Thank you so much for listening.